All right, now we're going to talk about, still in the time period of the turn of the century literature, we'll talk about another theme that the anthology sets out, which is the death of God. All right, is God dead? No. Okay, but I mean, God didn't die during this time period, but the idea is that people are losing their faith in God in this time period. Okay, that's what that means. And the concept was popularized by, many philosophers, but maybe the most famous being Friedrich Nietzsche, a German philosopher from the time period who's famous for his nihilism philosophy, which is like it's nihilism is like the word for nothingness. In other words, we have nothing to explain why we're here on earth or what we're supposed to do here in the absence of God, right? And the absence of God's spurned by, things like evolution, or spurned, not spurred by concepts like evolution, meaning like there wasn't somebody who was creating people just, or the earth or anything that's on the earth, they just kind of exploded from different, or not exploded, but evolved, in other words, from different combinations of chemicals that were on Earth, right? I mean, granted, all that kind of scientific understanding wasn't completely laid out then, but it was taking hold, and concepts like that and other concepts like deism and things like that eventually led to people questioning, whether God existed at all, and when you're questioning whether God exists and whether you have a purpose, obviously people can start losing a sense of purpose themselves. And so that's where you get that concept of nihilism and nothingness, like, okay, what am I here for? What do I do? What's the meaning of all this? It means nothing, right? Without somebody telling me that I need to live a certain way or do certain things with my life. So Charles Darwin's research in the Galapagos Islands and elsewhere led to the theory of evolution. And there were other scientists too contributing to these ideas, but of course he's chief among them, whereby animals, including humans, were placed in a chain of continual biological revision and improvement, right? Where certain mutations would occur to, just spontaneously, and the ones that were most helpful to animals to survive in a particular environment or plants or whatever, would be passed on to the next generations. They would be most likely to succeed, right? They would be the fittest version of the plant or animal or bacterium or whatever we're talking about, right? The ones that could live long enough to pass on their genes or whatever their code is, through either having children or, reproducing in some way or another. Those would tend to be the ones that are the most well adapted to their environments, right? And so that's how things would continue to evolve to the fittest level of what would survive in society. And Charles Darwin's theory was, hey, people look really close to these other animals. And so, like, through a series of adaptations and evolutions, we can actually eventually reach, the profusion of plants and animals and that culminated even in people that are out there and exist in the world. So for many, evolution, along with anthropological discovery, so anthropological meaning like human remains, and we see people progressing from like Australopithecus version of people, or to Homo habilis and Homo erectus, and on and on and on until we get to Homo sapiens, where we are now, and anthropologists trace those developments, and evolutions. Anyway, these evolutions challenge traditional views of creation, the literalism of the Bible, where, it starts off in Genesis, like, God created the earth in 6 days, right? And even, these notions even challenge the existence of God, because if there wasn't a creator, then is there even a God, right? The old deist philosophies, which were around with like most popularized, by like the American Revolution, founding people there, where they believed like kind of like the clockmaker view of the universe, where there is a God and he kind of sets things in motion and then lets them proceed and doesn't, intervene to change things. He just sets up the conditions and lets it flow, which could lead to, you can have that belief, and also believe in evolution, like evolution leading to those changes. But it got to the point, even in the 1800s, where people questioned whether there was, even the clockmaker at all, right? Quote unquote, the clockmaker, meaning the creator, God. Did anybody even set up these conditions? These challenges continued to affect the hold of religion over the lives and social conventions of turn of the century people. On one hand, temperance and mission movements gained. So temperance meaning like against alcohol and people wanting to convert people. That's a mission movement, and restore people, or at least continue them in a certain sense of spirituality and religiosity. While issues like birth control, homosexuality, and the psychology of sex entered the fore of public attention. So these things were starting to come into discussion, of scientists and social scientists and things like that, and started to change the game up for a lot of people. Although, we really don't see a lot of this concept taking hold till like much later. So a lot of prejudice at this point, against homosexuality and birth control and things like that. And even, women breaking outside of the social norms. We see like, many images of women, and that leads us to the next topic, images of women. So we're going to go on to that. There was the angel in the house, female image that was so named and popularized by Charles Patmore's poem of the same name. Or no, he's got that poem that talks about the angel in the house, and that glorified the self-abnegating. And when I say self-abnegating, I mean like self-sacrificing. Like you don't think of yourself, you think of others. That kind of version of women, the highly domesticated, pure Victorian woman who continued to inhabit literature and social convention. She was always putting everyone else ahead of herself and thinking of them and giving up her life in the service of her family. However, that sway of the angel in the house gradually faded along with the close of Queen Victoria's reign. Marmee, that's the mother's character's name in Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, whom we read last week. So Marmee of Little Women exhibits many of the qualities of this traditional female image, while Mary E. Wilkins Freeman's mother, right, in The Revolt of Mother, which we read this week, she acted like the angel in the house, right? But then there's the revolt of Mother, and that's kind of during her 40 years of patient anticipation of her promised house. No spoilers, but let's just say it's not titled The Revolt of Mother for nothing, right? And that kind of encapsulates this kind of transition that we're seeing in the roles of women during this time period. We start off with Angel in the House, and we move to Femme Fatale and New Women, right? All right, well, that brings us to Femme Fatale. All right, so the mother is transformed into a monster, in the concept of the femme fatale, so to speak. Her very reproductive capabilities, that theretofore defined women as wife and mother to children, veer to their opposite extreme, and defines women as a seducer and destroyer of men. It's kind of like tapping into the Eve mentality, where like Eve is the seducer and so destroyed the natural order of the earth or of the world, and who knows what that natural order was meant to be. Was it that men and women were equal? I don't know, but like from the Eve story, we had so many men arguing throughout time that women need to be subjugated to men, because look at what happens to women when they're not. They seduce men into making bad choices, and women make the bad choices themselves, and the men follow suit to save the women, right? Adam wanted to be with Eve, therefore he ate of the fruit. So that ideology of woman as seducer and destroyer of men goes hand in hand with femme fatale. Well, femme fatale literally means fatal female or fatal woman, and thus carries with her a voracious and tantalizing power that can lead to the death of men. And they can seduce them to their death, and literally, isn't that what Eve did, right? She introduced mortality into the earth by eating of the knowledge of eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? Then people became mortal. They suddenly could die. So you get that femme fatale, the fatal female. She brings death with her as she seduces. So the fatal female thus carries with her that voracious and tantalizing power that can lead men and others to death. But that power is undercut by its immorality and anxiety-inspiring destructiveness, much as a monster may be viewed both in awe and terror. Famous femme fatales include Dreiser's Sister Carrie and Augusta Webster's Circe. So as you read in the Circe poem, Circe is an enchantress or a witch, right? And so she can enchant men to do her bidding, right? And so she can lead to their death, but she's the femme fatale is viewed as immoral and inspires anxiety, and often these femme fatales are feared, right? Sometimes they're viewed in awe by certain segments of the population, but by the moral segments of the population, they inspire terror and avoidance, right? And often they can we see them playing maybe your cardboard character type roles in literature, where they're just painted, one-dimensionally as a villain, right? But then you can get more complex depictions of women too, of femme fatale women. So they're not all, completely one-dimensional. That leads us to the new woman. Okay, so this literary concept of women during this time period, is of the woman who rebels against the angel in the house role imposed upon her by society. This rebellion takes internal conviction, strength, endurance, and commitment to a new set of ideals. Often the new woman, though triumphant in throwing off the angel role, concomitantly suffers a harsh social penalty for what she's done, for repudiating society's mores and the rules that society thrusts upon her. So she revolts against those rules, but she often suffers a social penalty for revolting against the norms and traditions of society, as did Charlotte Perkins Gilman in real life, as does Chopin's Edna Pontellier in The Awakening, and Ibsen's Nora in A Doll's House. Although, interestingly, Mary E. Wilkins Freeman's mother seems to triumph without negative consequence. So that's a really fun story to read, and we're reading it this week, Mary E. Wilkins Freeman's The Revolt of Mother. So I encourage you to read that carefully, and it's a fun read, and you'll definitely see the image of the angel in the house transitioning to new woman in the character of Mother. So enjoy.